Devil, my friend,
Oh, yeah.
I think if there's anybody who would know hot things, it's you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's only right that you let our beloved Fangs know what they can order now, courtesy of Coney Island.
Oh, yeah, man. We're in the kitchen. You know it gets hot in the kitchen. And what else better for your finger foods, for your tacos, for your victims that you may be eating? Maybe some sauce. And you should get it from the sauce boss. Coney Island sauce. Oh, yeah. Get some of that good stuff. Oh, yeah. You like to sprinkle it on anything. You could sprinkle it on your fingers. Sprinkle it on your toes. Sprinkle it on your hose. Anything you want to sprinkle goes.
Absolutely. We have partnered with Coney Island Saucery. Aaron is fantastic. We really appreciate all the love he's given to the show, and we're very, very pleased and honored to be a part of him. So he's got 4 sauces out of various heat levels to enjoy on all your various foods, but also for anybody who is already following his socials, our socials, or is about to be, newly announced partnership with Slayer.
Oh yeah.
Coney Island
burning to fire.
Oh yeah, Coney Island Saucery does have a Slayer brand hot sauce coming out very, very soon. And so make sure that you check that out for all your various levels of spice. This is Vampireanddevil, Coney Island Saucery. Horns up. Fangs out.
Devil, my friend, I got a question for you. You ever had a pet or an animal that just absolutely hates you? I know that I have. I bet the Fangs, Infernos, and Ghouls have. And when it comes to animals, pets, things that are not of human that just absolutely hate the general populace, I suppose that sharks, Jaws, is probably right up there as a very, very evil animalistic entity ridding its territory of humans. But you ever get the feeling that crocodiles have that same kind of disdain for human life?
Oh yeah, you know what I mean? They gotta say, they always tell you, see you later, alligator. After a while, crocodile. And that's what we're gonna talk about. The crocodile movie of all crocodile movies was the Fangs pick for the letter L. We're gonna go to the lake. What lake are we gonna go to?
Lake Placid.
Oh shit! Watch out, man.
Oh yeah, being watched over by an incredibly foul-mouthed Betty White.
Oh yeah, I mean if the beauty of this movie, it's crazy. It's such a weird movie because this movie is kind of sort of in the line of those movies where you had all these horror movies that were just like coming out at the time in the 90s and in the early 2000s that were not really the greatest movies, but they were entertaining, but they had such a crazy cast and such a good cast. And this is like one of those movies where it's like, you could do like a movie like Sharknado that takes itself a little bit not so serious, where this movie's a little bit more serious than that, but it's still off the wall. And like you said, you got Betty White in this movie, but you got Bill Pullman, who's like huge. You've got, the king, I will rule you, Oliver Platt in this movie. So it's so crazy that this movie has such an ensemble of like A-lister actors. But yeah, this is a C or a D-listing movie.
It's funny too, man, because even somebody like Bridget Fonda, who I like and I've seen in so many different things, but it took me kind of looking back over her filmography to realize just how many things I've seen her in that I like. Like, don't get me wrong, I've got like my go-tos that I really like. I'm a big fan of Single White Female. I think that movie's just absolutely awesome, and I think it's really underrated. But then you kind of look at like other movies that she's in, like Monkey Bone and just a bunch of just cool like little movies that are like a little quirky, or others that kind of have like that cult following behind them. And I just started like scrolling down, and I was like, oh, well, every time I thought of Bridget Fonda, I always thought of Single White Female, or I thought of this, or I thought of that. But then it would be like, but she was also here and here and here and here, even in uncredited roles where you're kind of like, yeah, but she was still in that movie. That's crazy too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, obviously, one of my favorite movies with her in it is going to be Jackie Brown, since I'm a huge Quentin Tarantino fan. So, and she didn't have a huge role in that movie, but she was looking good in that movie. That's all. That's all you could say. And like I said, yeah, this movie was, the same. The cliche. She's a paleontologist. And she's gonna go to a lake and try to solve murders, and everyone's like, well, I don't know why you're doing here. She's like, I don't even know why the hell I'm doing here. The guy that I was messing around with, my professor or whatever like that, is now sleeping with my best friend, kind of like weird thing. And of course, Bill Pullman is just gonna, he's the leading man. He was a decent looking guy. He does that amazing speech in Independence Day that gets all the girls' panties wet, for sure. But yeah, he's gonna pull man Jane Fonda, because he doesn't have any. He likes a little bit of a trunk in his bunk, and just like Jane Fonda doesn't like anything in the back of her Honda. Oh, that's another story.
Oh yeah, that's the 11 p.m. episode of the Vampire and Devil podcast. But no, for sure, man. But it's a really great cast for a movie that's considered like very like low end. Like sharks have always been considered like really the dominant killer, animal. Like even when you look at like the over the top campy stuff like Sharknado and all this kind of stuff, sharks are still always just kind of considered like, no, that's your killer animal of choice. Like typically, like, Discovery Channel, all those places do their Shark Week. Everybody's always fascinated. But there are a large amount of like killer croc movies. And, as fun as Lake Placid is, it's just never really considered, to be particularly elite. And I don't mean elite as far as like a high end quality movie. I just mean elite as far as just like, a quality, scary, like, animal movie. I mean, even movies like Arachnophobia and whatnot tend to get considered, even bats tend to get considered like higher than Lake Placid. And Lake Placid, especially with the cast, would probably be considered a more impressive movie, yet it's really just kind of shrugged off.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I mean, like you were saying, you don't get too many good movies, all the, like you said, all the underwater or water creatures tend to be sharks, with all the 9 million. And not to say that there's not 9 billion crocodile movies. I
Yeah.
mean, there are a billion crocodile and gator horror films. And that's the crazy thing about this movie, about Lake Placid, that I find interesting, is even though it is kind of that low budget, kind of weird, kind of campiness with this amazingly huge big cast, and at least in my opinion, I put this as probably the best gator horror movie. You know what I mean? That's like that crocodile alligator kind of test movie. I mean, other than the one that we just got done talking about, in a previous episode with Toby Hooper with Eaten Alive. But then
Right.
that really was kind of like a very subpar character in the movie, where Blake Placid, the main villain in this movie, is the gator.
Absolutely. And even a movie like Eaten Alive, which is great that we had already previously discussed, I would say you would have to be probably more of a Toby Hooper fan, to really come across or really sit down for that movie, just because it's really not going to hit the brain heavily, and again, it's not the focal point either. So it's definitely understandable when it comes to that. But yeah, bro, like you were saying, basically Bridget Fonda's character, Kelly, she just kind of gets shipped up to Maine, up into Stephen King territory, because, she kind of assumes that's the reason. And then, of course, her ex-boyfriend is kind of like, no, it's totally nothing to do with that. But she is kind of telling a little bit about her backstory and is like, yeah, well, the fact of the matter is, my ex left me for my best friend, and they felt uncomfortable about it with Wild. They won't put it on Front Street. I know better. They shipped me off to Maine, just kind of get me out of the picture for a little while. So I'm only here to check out this tooth, but now I'm involved in this whole like crocodile killing spree. And, not to jump too quickly ahead yet, because we haven't really discussed that opening scene, which is definitely that classic animal horror type of kill, where it's just the guy minding his own business, kind of, looking around, just kind of checking things out and scuba diving around until he gets bitten in half.
Yeah, I mean that beginning scene was basically kind of like you knew what you were in store for. He comes out of the water, the sheriff's not really paying much attention, and then it has that kind of Jaws kind of feel where bubbling, he's getting attacked. You don't really get to see the gator that much. He pulls the dude out, and he's basically half of his body's only left, and it's pretty gruesome. It's a cool little effect. And that's the cool thing about the gator in this movie, even though it is kind of a little cheesy at one while there is a little bit of CGI, that early CGI that kind of takes away from it. But like whenever you see the gator in full actual like real kind of mode, it's really cool, and it goes to credit for Stan Winston and his effects crew for creating the big huge giant gator at times when they actually have the physical gator on set, because obviously, you're not gonna throw in these actors with real gator, and like yeah, like you said, even though this gator is supposed to be, a freshwater gator and not supposed to be, coming into lakes and stuff like that. This is like, yeah, they're not supposed to be in this area, but well, they are, and then you kind of find out in a little bit later in the movie, which will explain why the gator's there, and the reasoning why this gator is in Lake Placid to begin with. But yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. I thought the gator effects were straight up right to begin with. There's a lot of cool, gnarly kills in this movie. It is, like I said, it is kind of gruesome, but like not overly gruesome. So it was kind of cool. But yeah, I just thought like, the whole beginning movie of this is like kind of just a fun intro to all these characters. You know what I mean? And everybody's like crazy. You got the sheriff who's kind of like this weird kooky character. You got Bill Pullman, who's like a wild and game life guy, and his character's kind of off. You have Jane Fonda, who's like the paleontologist, and you hear her story, and she's kind of kooky. You got Oliver Platt, who's like this like famous crocodile hunter slash wrangler, and he's like completely off his wall and bonkers. And
Yeah,
that's the cool thing.
he's like a crazy Steve Irwin.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just so crazy that all these characters are all like really weird characters all together, kind of just meshed into this story about a lovely crocodile just trying to mind his own business and just chill, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's like Jaws, man. You shouldn't have gone into his water. Well, it's the lake is his, man. Placid is his.
Yep. And that's the thing that's also kind of funny too. So of course, in the investigating of this giant crocodile situation, just this investigating of Lake Placid is when you really get introduced to, Betty White's character, who's basically just this little old lady that just kind of lives on Lake Placid and mostly just kind of keeps to herself. But the funny thing is frankly, she's an asshole.
Yeah.
Like, she really is, which is insane because she is absolutely not the dim-witted golden girl that we've all become accustomed to and stuff. But she's really this kind of like horrible person where she doesn't have any respect for authority. She doesn't really like people around. Like, she's not that kind of crazy cat lady like psycho person, but she's just kind of like that just kind of angry, just kind of sharp tongue, brash, lady who just minds her own business and doesn't really want people just intruding or asking too many questions. She speaks honestly about murdering her husband despite, and the sheriff's office is kind of like, they're listening, and she's like being really honest about it. She's like, go dig it up if you don't believe me that it's a thing. But at the same time, they're kind of chalking it up more to just like the nonsensical ramblings of just like a crazy lady. But she's talking about like, y'all shouldn't be here because you're just, invading its territory because it's not a public Lake Placid. It's his Lake Placid. Like, she's aware of this crocodile that lives there. And it's like, look, if you mind your business, it leaves you alone. But, like you said, when it comes to like Jaws, like if you're in its space, it's going to rid you of being in its space. And she's at one point just chilling with one of the officers, and she's like, can I get arrested by basically telling you that I want all of your colleagues to just get eaten alive by this crocodile? And the deputy is just kind of like, maybe, I don't know, I guess. He's weird. He's just kind of sitting there like, again, it's just the nonsensical ramblings of a crazy lady. So despite the fact that she's rooting for the death of my colleagues, it's not really worth me arresting her or doing anything about it because they're just the ramblings of a crazy person.
Yeah, yeah, like you said, when she's like, "Yeah, I killed my husband," they're all like, "Haha, yeah, crazy old lady." And then, like I said, when they finally realize that she knows about this crocodile, she's been feeding this crocodile. They see her basically kind of herding her cow towards, towards the crocodile, and it's like, and that's what I like about this movie, where versus like, because they even talk about it in the movie, with the crazy crocodile hunter and stuff like that. Like everybody's like, oh, we got to stay away from the water. And, like when you come to a shark movie, where if it's a shark movie, you're safe as long as you're, in Jaws, as long as you stay out of the water or anywhere close to the water, Jaws isn't going to get you. But unlike Jaws, Lake Placid crocodile can get out of water. And that's what I like about it, where he's like, yeah, he's not bound to just a lake. If he wants to come after you while you're in your campgrounds, he can come after you. And that's what I like about it, because it's like, yeah, the sweet old lady is like, oh, just mind his own business and he's in the lake. Yeah, but yeah, okay, if it was a shark in the water, I can kind of understand that. Yeah, you can kind of just give it some sacrificial animals to throw in there to feed it, keep it good. But a crocodile eventually is just gonna want to get out of the water, and it can wreak havoc anywhere. So it's like, yeah, the old lady, that crocodile it was gonna come and get people regardless of whether or not they were going into space or not. Because like you said, it can just come out of the water and just walk into your house and eat you while you're in your house having breakfast, having some scrambled eggs. It can just walk in and just chomp you
Yep.
anytime.
No, absolutely. And then ultimately, they've come to the decision while kind of deciding what they're going to do and how they should do it to be like, well, here's the thing. If we can catch it alive, there's never been something to study like this. Like, there's never been the ability to study or look at or research, a crocodile of this magnitude. While there might have been like bigger crocodiles, there haven't been just like the size and strength of a crocodile like this. So you've got like the forest ranger and the deputy sheriff guy or whatever, who's basically like, look, I've got a gun with exploding rounds and I would rather just take this guy out, this monster out, and just stop the madness, versus Bridget and Oliver's characters are basically like, no, but we should try. It's kind of weird because you do get those people that are kind of like, typically their characters, not so much the crocodile hunter guy, a little bit, but they tend to be a little bit more like, no, like, are you nuts? Like, why are we still here? Can we like not be in the danger zone? Can we not be in the kill zone? But they're more like, no, we should try to catch it. We have the means, at least in some way, shape, or form. And even Bill Pullman's character is like, yeah, but it will probably kill us. Can we just get rid of it? And they try to flip his like Hippocratic like oath on him, where they're like, you're a park ranger. It's your job to like protect against like, the extinction of animals. And they basically do get everybody on their side to be like, okay, well, look, we're going to try and corral this thing. I've got a big enough net to at least tie it up enough to get us to be able to tranquilize it. But hey, look, I'll still give it to you. If that fails, you still have your boomstick. So you go ahead and do what you need to do, And they use one of the cattle as like a worm on a hook to get the crocodile in the area, and it works. But it also leads to kind of like that end of Jaws. I know we're making a lot of references, but it's kind of just the best comparison. That kind of ship in Jaws versus helicopter in Lake Placid, where the crocodile tries to grab the cow but misses, but it causes Oliver to lose control of the helicopter and it crashes, and now he's in a sinking ship with a crocodile swimming around.
Yeah. I mean, and that pretty much almost leads to like two of my favorite scenes in this whole entire movie. And the first one is, yeah, the helicopter comes down, and then all of a sudden the crocodile is going to do what a crocodile is going to do, and it's going to attack. And it's so big, and it goes and attacks and gets stuck inside the helicopter, which I thought was the funniest thing. One of the funniest thing in this movie was like, well, we caught it. Not exactly how we wanted to catch it, but the crocodile stuck. He's good. Let's trank him and trank him. And then my favorite part of the other part of it was, okay, they got the big gator tranked and he's good to go. All of a sudden, they're starting to swim out, and all of a sudden, boom, there's a second shark, or not a second shark, a second crocodile, a female crocodile, all of a sudden out of nowhere, and they're like, holy shit. And then all of a sudden, the guy, the dude, the sheriff with the big gun who wants to blow up things, boom, blows the shit out of that freaking crocodile. And he's like, well, at least I got to use my gun. And then the whole entire time, which leads into what was my favorite part with the crocodile, is that Betty White knew that there was another crocodile, a female crocodile. And they're like, you knew about this, didn't you? And she was like, I was just hoping that, she was kind of giving that, I was hoping it would bite you in the ass and get you or something like that. It's like all the little things that, like, she knew about, the big crocodile. She knows about this. And, and then we'll allude to the end, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But at the very end of the movie, there's a little bit of a tidbit of something else that she knows. So her character is probably the most diabolical of all the characters in this movie. Like, she's just full of secrets and full of bad language.
No, absolutely, for sure. And yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, he gets to use his big gun, and like you said, they're like, well, did she know there was another one there? And it's like, yeah, but she didn't want to tell us because she was afraid you would blow its head off. And I was like, oh, great. That's hilarious, because that's exactly how it happened. And then it was kind of that typical, like, bygones be bygones, relationships have formed, like Hector, Oliver's character is going to the hospital because he got bit in the ass, so to speak. And the sheriff decides to go with him, because the ambulance driver's like, I got room for one more if somebody wants to kind of like, ride along and make sure he's okay. And the sheriff's like, yeah, I'm down. I got his back. And then, there's that awkward exchange of like pleasantries between Bill and Bridget, to where it's like, go ahead, just kiss her already or whatever. And then they go their separate ways just for Bridget to come up to the side of the car and be like, is there just no room for romance? Like, does nobody make the first move when it comes to this town? It's just really funny, because as you're watching it, you're like, it's going to happen. It's kind of like in Tremors when Kevin Bacon's character and the girl like finally just, break the ice.
Yeah, you knew that Bill was gonna, get himself some loving in that movie. He's the sexy heroine of the movie, or and Bridget are the destined to be together. And then it leads into what I alluding with one of another favorite part of the scene of this movie. The very end of the movie, you see Betty White chilling over there by the dock, and you're like, okay, what's she doing now? And she's throwing little bread pieces, and you see teeny little baby dinosaur crocodiles in the water, and you're like, oh great. Betty White had some more grandma had some more tricks up her sleeve to do, and which kind of alludes to the 9 million Lake Placid movies that they've made after this. And if you if you've watched Lake Placid and you've seen this movie before and you enjoy it, and you're like, okay, it's kind of campy. Yeah, though the other Lake Placids that come after this are about 1 billion times worse. They didn't really get any good big actors. This was like this is the cream of the crop when it comes to the Lake Placid movies.
Yeah, absolutely. There's others, but you know what? They're definitely not going to show up on any of our episodes for better sequels. We can tell you that.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the funny thing too, Devil, is I like the end of that movie as well, because it's so goofy, because you've got Betty White just sitting on the dock feeding these little dino baby crocs to Bob Marley music, and then it shows as the final shot of the movie a highway procession with a semi truck with the gator just on the back of the truck, just tied down. Almost it reminds me a little bit of Hook when they turned the crocodile into the clock, and so he was kind of on display. But it was so weird, because it's just this procession with like a cop car in the front, a cop car in the back, this giant croc taking up the entire flatbed of like a semi truck, like what you would see like giant logs, strapped to, just cruising down the highway like without a care in the world. And there's a part of me that's like, you got to have your nuts tied on pretty tight to be the driver of that semi, wondering if this crocodile is going to wake up.
Yeah, or just to be a innocent bystander just driving by. Could you imagine, you're in Maine and you and your wife and your, two little Brugbats are in the back seat and you're getting ready to go on a vacation, and all of a sudden you're like, your little kid's like, "Mom and Dad, look, it's a big huge giant crocodile. Yeah, stop making lies." And then all of a sudden they just see it go right by, and it's like, holy shit, it is a big ass crocodile. It's almost, it's like those, when you see, coming to town, you're driving by and you see like this big giant dinosaur that's for display for like, like an amusement park or something. Like, holy shit, that's pretty cool. I was like, I couldn't imagine just driving by and all of a sudden seeing this big, huge, giant crocodile, like just chilling, sleeping on this bed. And it's like, I'm like, yeah, yeah. The ending of that movie was it was just so weird. It was just like, okay, this is how they're gonna do it. They're just gonna drive this giant crocodile down the middle of the highway.
Exactly, for sure. It's like, yeah, that thing goes by me. I'm like pulling over for a minute and just letting that thing go. Or all of a sudden, I'm going to take like 10 minutes to just make this like a fucking like NASCAR race and be like, dude, I'm getting the fuck away from that thing. I zoom, zoom, off I go. And be like, no, I don't want to be stuck behind the inevitable traffic accident. Or I'm just going to be like, you know what? I'm just going to let that thing go. So I'm just nowhere around the inevitable accident.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the obituaries there, my friend. Let's talk a little bit about how we rank this one. And why don't you kick this one off, man? How are you feeling about Lake Placid?
I mean, like I said, it's a fun movie. It's been years since I've seen it, but I remember bits and pieces of this movie. I remember like things that happened. I remember Betty White's character being crazy. I remember her being nearly as crazy as she was. So it was kind of fun to kind of go back and see her in this wild character and stuff like that. And almost forgot that there were so many big actors in this movie, being the fact that, like I said, it's such a sort of, not really low budget, but it's got that low budget kind of feel to it, that campiness kind of thing to it. It doesn't seem like it would be a Hollywood movie, you know what I mean? But like I said, it is a big Hollywood movie because, I mean, shit, all the actors that are in this are all huge, established, big actors that have been in like some, blockbuster movies. So yeah, it was one of those ones where it was like, holy shit, yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it. But yeah, I mean, overall, like I said, I mean, you're getting what you get. I mean, it's just like anything else, when you see movies that are like this, you know exactly what you're gonna get. It's straightforward. It doesn't shoot anything else other than what you thought you were gonna get. You're gonna get a crocodile movie that's absurd, that's campy. It's got a little bit of comedy. It's got some drama. It's got some sexual tension. It's got some blood. It's got some guts. It's got shit getting blown up. What else is there else to say about Lake Placid? I mean, when it comes to these kind of movies, like these cheesy, horror movies about killer animals, especially like killer water animals, like you said, with Deep Blue Sea and those kind of stuff like that. I put this one as a little bit higher in the anarchy of those, because like I said, you get so many gator movies and so many crocodile movies, but like I said, almost all of them are super low budget and super horrible. Most croc movies are really, really, really bad. And this one is not great, but it's not nearly as bad as some of those other ones. So for me, like I said, overall, it's fun. It's a movie that you can watch. You can watch it again. I wouldn't go as far as saying watch it many times a year, but you could probably watch it every couple of years and just enjoy it and stuff like that. And then, like I said, if you're a fan of like the actors and the actresses in the movie, it's good to go back into their, their chronological, going through their categories and their catalogs of these movies that they've done and go, oh yeah, shit, I forgot that Bill Pullman was in, Late Placid. Hey, I haven't seen that for a while. Pop that in and
Yeah.
have a little chuckle with it and enjoy it. Maybe have a couple drinks with while you're watching it, just to kind of enjoy yourself a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely not going to win any huge awards. But like I said, when we go in, you're going from, one being, the worst movie probably in the entire world to giving it a 10. I mean, for me, I think a good solid 5 is probably pretty good for this movie because it's good. But then I'll bump it up just a teeny little bit from a 5 just because of the people they put in this movie with the big actors and Betty White. Betty White gives that a little bump more just because she's amazing in this movie and I love her character. So for me, I'm going to give this movie a 6 now then.
I'm with you, man. I'm cool with that. I think that's a good solid score for it because, yeah, again, the movie itself, because it does lack a little bit of like just story depth. There's not a lot of real storytelling to this. Yeah, you get tipped off at the end of the movie with why the gator exists to begin with, and it's a cool little, oh, wow, it's like, it's being harvested, is and being grown. And that's pretty cool. But there's no there's no deep rooted anything when it comes to this. You don't have to scratch the surface too much. It's pretty much right there on the surface. So yeah, I definitely think it's a low scoring movie, but the quality of the cast is great. The humor is fun. The one-liners is cool. So I'm definitely with you on a 6 there. I love Betty White's character because it's so out of pocket for her. And it's, it's so out of character. I just think she's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, again, the cast is great. So that's the way it's going to be. Fangs, Infernos, and Ghouls. We are going to give a 6.0 to Lake Placid, and we're going to wish it a be gone as we finish up with this of the alphabets of horror, letter L, when Lake Placid is the way. So we will be back for another alphabet when we are ready to unleash it on you. Horns up. Bangs out.
Devil, my friend, I think it's time that we spill the tea. Brutalities. Vampire and Devil podcast couldn't be more excited, more humbled to let you all know that we have partnered with very dear friends of ours for a long time in Brutalities. And there's so much great stuff, so many flavors, so much to enjoy, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about it. Isn't that right there, my friend?
Oh yeah, we like it hot. Of course the Inferno likes it hot. Do you like the hot tea? Well, you might as well get some Brutality. Yeah, horror movies, puns, rock and roll, Brutality's got it all.
Absolutely. When it comes to the vampire, you know that he's going to absolutely gravitate towards that Nosferatu or that Nosferatu brew. Absolutely a favorite of mine. And we got to show a little bit love to, by all means, the biggest franchise in horror right now. That would be Terrifier. So Brutalities has brought you Terrifier. But that's just from the vampire. The devil has some favorites of his own.
Oh yeah, do you like the movie Pumpkinhead? Well, how about a little pumpkin bread for your throat holes? And like I said, with the rock and roll fans and the horror fans, Wednesday 13 fans, do you like Wednesday 13 and tea? How about a couple of those? With the Summertime Suicide and a couple other ones too. So if you like Wednesday 13 and you like the tea and you like the Brutalities, go to the website.
Absolutely. And so, of course, we like to look out for those that look out for us. We love you, Fangs. We love you, Infernos. But as a courtesy from Brutalities to be bestowed on you, we have that Vampire and Devil coupon code, don't we, my friend?
Oh, yeah. You want to save a little dough, little cheddar, maybe buy some more shit? Go on the line, Brutalities, type in Vampire and Devil, and you get 10% off your order. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So it's getting into the chilly weather. People need to warm their bones. They need to warm what little skin they may or may not have. But Brutalities is the way to get it done. So that's the way it's going to be because Vampire and Devil said so. Horns up, fangs out for Brutalities.
What's up? It's the devil here, coming from the south, the far, far south. Anyway, we're gonna skip over those 80s horror comedies and move on to the 90s horror comedies. And first off, we're gonna start with Rockula. Have you seen Rockula? Ooh, it's so cheesy. It's so late 80s, early 90s. It's got a lot of fun. It's got vampires. It's got pirates. It's got Thomas Dolby. It's got Tony Basil. It's got death. It's got guts. It doesn't have any of that stuff, but it's got a lot of cool, fun shit in it. It's a fun movie. It's a lot of musicals in it. It's got some music. It's got some rock. It's got some rap. It's got everything that you need and none of the crap. You should check out Rockula, the beginning of the 90s horror comedies. Coming at you live from the South. Like I said, the devil with the mouth.
So, Devil, my friend, some people deck the halls. Some people do the family thing. You know, some just stay by themselves, ponder on things. As one season starts to end and a new season creeps up in only a week, as we say goodbye to 1 year, depending on how it was spent, hello to a new year, as resolutions are made. I want to start that over again because I had a good flow and then I fucked it up. Devil, my friend. Some deck the halls. They spend time with family. They spend time alone. All kind of about how people like to spend one holiday season as it creeps towards a new holiday in only a week. Now, when it comes to that, it's about the decisions that were made from a previous year to the resolutions made for the following year. So I think it's only apropos that we talk a little bit about the blood that can be spilled on New Year's Eve.
Oh yeah, that's the big thing about New Year's. Everybody's trying to make themselves better, do their resolution, lose that weight, get that better job, get that honey to say hello, try not to make it down to see me in hell maybe, but all kinds of weird things happen on New Year's, and that's what's good about the New Year's holiday. Just like you have it with every holiday. You have the Christmas ones, you have the Thanksgivings, you got Easter, you got that. New Year's isn't no different. There's always been a lot of cool New Year's horror movies, things decking into it. You know what I mean? All kinds of different things, and it's always gonna be the same. Depending on what year it is, what year it's gonna be. There's always gonna be a killer trying to get you and trying to murder you before you see that ball drop.
Absolutely, for sure, man. And so we're talking a little bit about the old school and the new school on this particular showdown as we talk about 1980s New Year's Evil, and we're going to pit it up against 2013's Antisocial. And the one thing that's also kind of interesting to start off, as we kind of roll into New Year's Evil, is that this comes not too far off of the heels of course, Halloween kind of starting that holiday-based horror trends, and of which you've already touched on it, where there's Friday the 13th, there's Halloween's, there's prom nights and slumber parties, which obviously aren't necessarily holidays, but you've got April Fool's Day, you've got all these other things where, again, Halloween was kind of the first like serial killer kind of slasher villain movie / genre that kind of started off this infatuation with holiday horrors, of which New Year's Evil is a part of that.
Yeah, it was a big trend in the 80s. Like I said, once the Halloween kind of got, and you got that success of that that film series, everybody was just like, what ones can we do? Oh, we'll do Valentine, My Bloody Valentine's, April Fool's Day. It's like, we're gonna have a Labor Day killing. It's gonna be an Easter movie. We're gonna do Tax Day next, or Flag Day Killer, or other some stupid shit. That probably, more than likely, if you really, really want to, you could probably find a horror movie for literally every holiday. Even like the non-really weird ones, like your Labor Day and like Tax Day and Flag Day, there probably is a horror movie that's based on that. So yeah, you'll have to see. Like I said, I'm pretty sure if you Google somebody somewhere, whether it was a huge movie franchise, big huge Hollywood directed movie, or an independent film, I can guarantee you there is a horror movie for every occasion of the holiday seasons.
Absolutely, my friend, for sure. And as we jump into New Year's Evil, it's actually got a very simplistic premise to it. It's got a very basic storyline to it. But I'll be honest, man, I like the storyline behind it because I think it's interesting, because while when you think about the concept behind it, it's completely impossible for a serial killer to be able to do this. But it doesn't change the fact that it's a unique concept to tackle, which is basically there's this girl, Blaze, which is what she's known to as by her fans, who's like she's basically like a personality, you know, she's kind of like us, but she's like, you know, for like the 80s style, like MTV VJ kind of thing. And it's one of those things where like she's hosting this kind of like telethon, you know, ring in the new year with like your favorite songs from the music countdown of all the year. You know, there's a cute like Pink Floyd reference to a song they probably couldn't reference specifically, but used obviously one of the more well-known lines from it, which I thought was really, really funny for that. But she gets a phone call from this like weirdo guy using a voice box to disguise himself, kind of like the OG Ghostface, telling her that he is going to kill somebody close to her every midnight for each time zone leading up to her inevitable kill at the very end. And so it's based up in the 4 like time zones. So it's got the Eastern time, it's got Central, it's got Mountain, and it's got West Coast. And so that's kind of my premise there, like, or what I was talking about earlier is like, in general, that is completely impossible because you've got 1 hour to get from like California to Denver, Denver to Chicago, Chicago to New York. That shit's not happening. But the idea behind it, I really, really like.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Like, cause I was thinking that too. Like in the beginning, you know, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, what? There's no way that, you know, ideally that they could kill somebody in a different time zone and moved it like that. And then once you like, you know, once you start watching the movie, you kind of understand that the killer is actually in California, which is where they're at, which is the last time zone, and that he's just basically gonna kill everybody and the time in LA of when it's supposed to be at midnight in New York, because you have that time period in between. So I was like, okay, now that makes a little more sense. You know, I was like, how in the hell is this one person gonna travel that quick to get from time zone to time zone? I'm like, unless he's like got like the DeLorean and can go back to the future or some kind of shit. You know how he's gonna do it. But that was pretty cool. You know what I mean? It was just like, it was interesting because it's a movie that, like you said, it's a Happy New Year's, so it's, it's crazy. It's like, you have the New York one, obviously, in New York, whenever it goes down, it's, 12 o'clock, midnight hits the New York, it's only 9 o'clock in California. So like, it's just cool. Like in this movie, you keep on seeing more and more celebrations of these like, New Year's thing. It just reminds me of, one time, I remember doing that one time. Me and my friend went to see a movie one time on New Year's, and by the time we got out of the movie theater, it was like 12:15 or something like that. And we're like, oh shit, man, we missed New Year's. And then we were watching MTV or something like that, and they had the recap of it. So we just, at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when it was New Year's on the recap, we ran outside and was like, ding, 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 Happy New Year. Or, or even when we're messaging friends, like when we're here on the East Coast, we have friends, friends of ours that live on, in LA and California and all that. It's always like, Happy New Year. And then they're like, oh yeah, I still got 3 hours left. And you're like, oh yeah, that's right. It's not Happy New Year. It's not. I'm like, well, let me tell you, in the future, there's some crazy shit that happens. You know what I mean? Because I know you're not in 2025 yet, but, wait till you see what happens in 2025. I like fucking with people that are in different time zones. Like, oh my God, when that midnight strikes, you're going to see some cool shit.
Oh no, absolutely. Or it's like when you're leaving work on like, the 30th. Let's just say you've got, New Year's Eve off or whatever, and you come back to work on either the 1st or the 2nd, and like I'm this way. I like to be all cheeky as I'm walking out the door, where I'm like, see you next year, because at first everybody's always like, huh? And then it's like, oh, huh.
Yeah, I like to do that. Like, I haven't seen you since last year.
I know. Just busting out a little bit of that dad humor.
But that's what was cool about this movie. Like I said, you had that where it was that continual And you know, like I said, it's got some pretty cool kills in it and stuff like that in the movie. I mean, like I said, I mean, the meat and potatoes of this movie is pretty basic. It's
Yeah.
just, you know, this guy going around killing, like you said, he's got the ghost face. Kind of reminds me a little bit more of like the talk box that like the musicians wear, where it's like
Yeah. No,
kind of thing.
100%. That's definitely the style, but I'm more just because, that initial phone call, well, frankly, all the phone calls to Blaze, it's like, that disguised mechanical voice through the phone. That's just kind of my Ghostface reference.
Yeah. So I mean, who knows? I mean, that's probably maybe that's maybe how Wes Craven and the people who wrote the screenplay for Scream may have used that as a reference. Like, oh yeah, remember that movie New Year's Evil when he was disguising his voice? Yeah, we should use that. So I mean, who knows? I mean, that could be interesting. But like I said, when it comes to these New Year's movies and New Year's Evil, I mean, it's a fun movie. It's got some cool stuff. You know, you got the rock and roll mom that's over here like just doing the telethon, and you got these bands that are playing that are like two completely different bands. And one's very that like kind of like new wave kind of punk goth kind of thing, and then you have another one that's yeah, it was just really weird. I mean, I guess like when you're kind of a low budget film, you really couldn't probably get anybody super big to be in this movie. They couldn't
Yeah.
get like Ozzy or Black Sabbath or anybody that was big in the early late 70s, early 80s. But I mean, it's fun. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's like who's going to these clubs and calling people on New Year's Eve like, yeah, man, I want to listen to this or I want that, requests and stuff like that,
Yeah.
giving people money and shit like that. It's like it's just a weird concept for a movie, but I love the whole like, you don't, and that's the cool thing about this movie too, where like, most of the time, you usually don't get to, you're trying to figure out who the killer is throughout the whole entire time, where you actually kind of like see who the killer is throughout this movie. They don't really hide it until the very end, which is a reason why they hide it at the very end. But that's what's cool about this movie, was like you saw the killer's face constantly throughout the movie. It's just that we weren't privy to know until you get to the end who that killer was anyway. So I thought
Yeah.
that was kind of cool, where like, most of the time in movies, they're hiding a killer's face. Even when you don't even know who that person is, they're still just hiding their face to begin with. And then you get that big reveal, where this one, they were just like, yeah, we're just going to tell you who the killer is straight up. But you really don't know who the killer is. Because
Yeah.
even though you saw his face, you don't know who his character is until you find out later on in the movie. And then once you start realizing who that is, that's when they pull the old switcheroo and put a mask on his face at the towards the end.
Right, which is so funny that they do that as well. But no, when it comes to the bands, I think it's cool because I actually like the music of this movie quite a bit, and the song itself, New Year's Evil, that they play throughout the movie. It's actually a song that I've always really liked because I've been familiar with this movie for a long time, and I know that song's got a little cult following behind it. But no, you're definitely right with like the low budget things. But I thought the bands were still like kind of cool because they were sort of this like Sex Pistols from Wish, kind of meets the Cramps, kind of meets 45 Grave, but without the Halloween aspect, but that just kind of look and style, which I just kind of thought was kind of cool. So I mean, I like the music behind it. But also one of the cool things about this is Blaze's son in this movie is played by our good friend in Grant Kramer from a previous episode of V&D.
Yeah, we got a little bit of a killer clowns from outer space kind of like that. Plays such a weird role in this movie. Like his character in this movie is just really, really weird. You know what I mean? He's putting like a pantyhose over his face and doing all this kind of weird emo stuff before emos were even a thing. You're like, and it's kind of cool concept because it kind of gives you that like maybe this guy's the killer. But then again, while you're watching it, you're kind of thinking too. You're like, maybe this dude's the killer. But then again, you saw who the killer was, so you couldn't be the killer. But it
Yeah.
still made you kind of think like maybe this guy is, because he's a little off his rocker. But yeah, I mean, the part with the bands though that I always found kind of funny was, yeah, the bands looked like they were legit real bands who would have done that kind of music and stuff like that, and it would have been really cool. But it looked like the people who were at the club were not real fans of that, and they just put them in like fake punk attire, and then was like, well, what are we supposed to do? And like, there's one scene where they're trying to slam dance, and the one guy looks like he's pretending like he's out of his gourd on drugs or whatever. So he's like overly rolling his eyes. And then there's like a girl in the mosh pit that's like getting bounced around, but she's kind of laughing the whole entire time. Like what the fuck is going on? Like it just basically was like, oh yeah, that scene's good enough. Yeah, just roll. We'll just, the one take's good enough. What it was like, it was just so funny because it wasn't like, when you see a lot of these, like especially these movies in the '80s when that punk scene and stuff like that was starting to get really big in the clubs. There are movies where you see people in the clubs in these movies that legitimately look like they could be punk. Not like some of the big actors are portraying, but like the background actors and the background people could have been, hey man, we're just gonna film this in a real punk club, and these guys are real punk kids, and these kids know how to slam. It's like these ones they just took like, hey, you want to be in a movie and pretend like you're a punk and do some slam dancing? What's slam dancing? You don't need to know. Just go in there and pretend like you're going crazy. Pretend like you're on drugs, and
I know.
So weird.
I know it's like when you take a movie like The Crow, which really had My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult playing in it and performing for fans of Thrill Kill Cult. It's like in Bruiser, you had the Misfits playing, and it was like their fans at the show, like rocking out to this actual band that exists that they care about. But yeah, no, so it's definitely very 80s. That's one of the little camp factors of this particular movie. And it's also kind of interesting with like some of these characters, because the movie, as much as I've always liked it, it's got such a weird like opening for me, because I love the insta kill like right off the bat, which I think is great. But the other thing that's also kind of funny is like you've got Diane / Blaze, who's like talking to her son about having her son come to the show, and he doesn't really want to because he's kind of missing his dad, and her like boyfriend or new husband or manager or whoever this kind of guy is was like getting on my last nerves like right off the bat, because you could tell that like she has this show, she has this obligation that she has to do, but she's trying to be a good mom too, and she's like trying to look out for her son, and she can see that her son's like kind of distressed, and this guy just keeps going on and on about like, we gotta go, we're late, let's go now, come on, let's go, we gotta go, we're late. And I'm like, dude, you have such a punchable face.
Yeah, his character is like the one person in the movie where you're just like, man, if anybody dies in this movie, I hope it's just him, just because he was just like, just an annoying annoying person the whole entire time. You're just like, oh my god, it's just like, I mean, it's like, come on, man, she's you obviously, she had this personality probably before you got together. If you're, like I said, if he was a boyfriend or a husband or just even a new manager, that like that's a part of it. Like you really wouldn't think that it'd be a manager, because it's like a manager would understand that she needs these obligations to do this kind of stuff. That's what she is. You know what I mean? She's got to do this stuff. She's got to do this kind of overly flirty and sexual thing, because that's part of her character, regardless of whether or not people might not like it. It's kind of weird too, because even when she's doing all these like kind of like sexual references and all this kind of sex talk, and she's wearing outfits that are very kind of skimpy, you have like this weird, I don't know, feeling, to me at least, that the son was a little into dynamic between like the son watching his mom do these kind of weird sexual things with these outfits, and it kind of, I don't know, there was kind of like some kind of weird tension between the son and his mother too. It's just like I said, Grant's character in this movie is just really just a weird kid. Like I can't completely understand what the mindset of his character was. It was just like I said, he was like, weird kind of, sexual fetishes with his mother / emo-y / a punk kind of look to him, but then he looked like he would be, a lawyer or something like that too. So it was just it was like a weird combination for his character.
No, absolutely. And the other thing too about this movie, which is incredibly 80s, especially for these slasher type movies, is the idea of the quote unquote final girl who's like basically trying to give hints to like the authorities and like trying to get people to understand. So like after the very first, conversation that she has with evil. She basically is like, look, this is not the typical weirdo that I'm just used to, that I can just kind of fuck with and shrug off because he's just a fan, or he's just a casual like kook or whatever. But she's like, no, there's something real about this, and he's threatening people who are close to me and like people that I actually care about. Like, we need more protection. And people are kind of like, yeah, well, we've got security and police here. She's like, well, then get more. And she actually is trying to have a conversation with the police, and the police is like, well, look, no, we do take threats seriously, but at the same time, like, why are you acting like you're shocked? You kind of brought this on yourself. Like, the way you represent yourself, the way you show yourself off, and the kind of shows that you host and run, that's your demographic. So it's that same kind of nobody believes me kind of initial buildup, which leads into, the series of kills that set up the finale.
Yeah. Like one of my favorite parts of the movie, as far as the kill wise, was the girl that he kills in the bar. I think was the second kill or whatever like that. Just because I'm a huge fan of the actresses. I can't remember her name offhand, but I remember her being in Last American Virgin. She was the "Come meet my big burrito." I just love her character in that movie. So it was like when it's been a while since I saw New Year's Evil, and I was like, oh my god, that's funny. It's like, because as soon as her voice, she has such a distinct voice that I was like, oh my god, is that the lady from Last American Virgin? And I IMDb'd it real quick. But yeah, that's the crazy thing about this movie. It's like it just goes straight into it. What was it?
Larissa Moritz.
Yeah. And I just love like that. Yeah, all the kills, it's all these like you said, it's they're killing off people who are familiar with with this world, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. And you have like these little kind of inklings of like who you think it might be. And like I said, I mean, that's what I love about the movie, like we said earlier, was like, this killer is basically, you can see him doing everything. He goes to the phone booth after he's done, and, he does the walk box, and he's like, this is evil, and I just killed somebody. Find him in the dumpster, woohoo, kind of thing. And then, it goes to that. And then, like you said, as it gets towards the end of the movie and stuff like that, and you get to the very end and the climax of what, who this killer was, you go and all of a sudden, the person go in and kill somebody. All of a sudden, the mom comes out and she's like, oh, the security guard's like, what's going on? Like, oh no, don't worry about anything, this is just my husband. Are you safe? Oh yeah, this is my husband. Then you find out that the husband was the killer the whole entire time, and hence the reason why he wore a mask for a little bit, so that he can go around and try to get people know who he is, as far as like the community of where she's at, because obviously they've been, would have seen her around. But yeah, I thought that was kind of like, it was weird, but it was kind of like, why? I mean, I know he was supposed to be somewhere, but why wouldn't that have been a thought to begin with? And my thought or theory is like, okay, somebody's going out killing somebody. I mean, I know you can't tell the voice and stuff like that, but it's like, oh, who the hell have I pissed off? Well, I'm probably not in the good graces of my ex-husband, so maybe, she wouldn't have like mentioned it to the cops that, yeah, maybe it could be my ex-husband, but there was never even any inkling to him. Like, oh, like I said, as soon as she sees him, she's like, oh no, this is my husband, or, whatever. She's like, like, oh yeah, he's perfectly safe. And then she finds out he's not perfectly safe.
No. But that's the other thing that's kind of weird too, is because they're basically talking about him. They make it sound at the beginning of the movie that he's like basically kind of out of town. Like he's not available to be at this show or hang out with, Grant's character. Because like he's like just like physically not in the area. Like it just wouldn't be possible. But then the funny thing is, as it leads over to the climax, is the strange thing is that the police, while they kind of shrugged off the beginning part when she tried to warn him that there was some weird shit going on, they were on their P's and Q's kind of when that situation happened. Because right off the bat, the guy is like, look, I'm not denying that this is your husband, but hey, look, dude, this building has been on lockdown for like 3 hours now. How did you even get in here? Like, how does nobody know who you are? How did nobody see you come and go? Like, you have explaining to do for you being here without going through necessary checkpoints, which is basically you standing outside freezing your ass off because nobody would have even allowed you in this building. So they were like really on top of that. And then of course it leads to, him booby trapping the elevator to kind of trap her, corner her. He basically, spills his guts out about, what a terrible person she is, and that he just wants to rid her out of the picture so that he can go to it's like a baseball game or a football game with his son, and they can have that kind of relationship, that real father-son relationship, which they have, but you don't really realize it. Because at first, again, going back to when Grant's character didn't want to really partake in the festivities, he was like missing his dad, but it was more of what you just kind of believe it to be. It's a kid missing his dad, and he's disappointed that his dad isn't here. And then even as things are kind of making their way through, you start realizing that there's stuff that Grant's off about, that you had already addressed. But it's nothing that's like really popping like that. It really wasn't until you get to that final climax and you show the almost obsession that Richard has with his son and wanting it to be this tight father-son relationship with the mother out of the picture, ultimate leading to her getting away, the police chasing him up to the roof for the final, farewell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those ones where, throughout like this movie, you have all these cool, crazy, events that happen, these cool kills, and then once you opened up the Christmas, this is a New Year's movie, and right before New Year's there's Christmas, and you get this big huge giant box from your parents, and you're like, oh hell yeah, I'm gonna get this freaking Nintendo that I've always wanted, or this big ass freaking thing. Oh yeah, this is cool. And you open it up, and it's just a big huge giant box of like shirts and socks and boxers and shit. And you're like, oh fuck, man, why do they make this big huge giant box for what could have been a little to fool you? And that's kind of like how this movie ended. It was like, all this meat and potatoes and all this cool shit, and then you get to the climax, and it's just like, really, that's how you're gonna end this movie? It was just very like anticlimactic.
It's so anticlimactic, dude. Yeah. But the funny thing is, it like leads into clearly a sequel we're not going to get. But again, like we've discussed before, that possibility, had there been a sequel, I would have seen it. I like the movie enough that had they done a sequel, regardless of the fact that it probably would have been, half the movie that New Year's Evil was, I would have still gone and seen it. But it's interesting. It's like his father jumps off this building, just goes splat on the ground. He's like all mangled up with his arms like back behind his head and stuff. Like, it's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah.
You see his son like unmask him, and it's not so much that like anguish of like sadness, but almost kind of, for me anyway, like the shattering of his like mental stability with the way that Grant's, for lack of a better term, sobbing. It was very strange. It just wasn't what I would expect from, the now death of your father hitting you, or you watching it happen, or whatever. It was very strange. And the police pull him off of the body, and he's just kind of set off to the side where he's holding the dad's mask because he jumped with that mask on his face, and you could just see the look and the curiosity, and then the ultimate like uncertainty as it leads to Diane being gurneyed into an ambulance, just to find out that now a masked character is now driving the ambulance. It shows the dead ambulance driver stuffed underneath, by the passenger feet area. And, of course, we have no reason to believe that that's not Grant. completely, now just brain dead, just serial killered out, to what I'm going to assume led to him murdering his mother.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, yeah, because I guess with the potential of the sequels of other movies and stuff like that, they kind of just left it open for a sequel, which I mean, I guess is smart because if you want to possibly, if you killed it completely, then you're like, well, how the hell are you going to make a sequel? I mean, unless it's a supernatural thing, you're
Yeah.
really not going to be able to make a sequel. So I guess they kept it open, in the possibility of like maybe this movie hitting, because how they were expecting it to hit like Halloween and all these other ones hit, and unfortunately, New Year's Evil was not really a great success. It became sort of a cult following years late, a couple, like 10, 20 years later, it starts to become this like cult success, but especially a lot of the New Year's ones. A lot of the New Year ones weren't really that really big when they hit. They was
Yeah.
years later that you had like the Terror Train and some of those other ones that are big New Year's horror movies that
Yep.
kind of like they didn't really get the big huge like initial like bam like the Halloween and some of the other holiday themed horror films did. But yeah, it was like yeah, you could definitely tell that they were like, well, yeah, let's just write it into a possibility, and then it's like, but the only problem with that though, it's like when you do that and there's no sequel ever, and it's been what 30, 40 years now, 30 some years now, it's like, well, what the hell do we get that ending then? It's
Oh,
like, then you have movies, like we've talked about it, where Basket Case, you know, ended and then all of a sudden they made a second one, and like, how the hell did they make a second one? Like,
right. Like,
with the
like
ending we got, it should have never been a second one. So
yeah, the main final guy, the main guy, Belial, went splat on the fucking road. Like, not only did we get a sequel, we got two.
yeah,
So it's really weird with that. But yeah, so Devil, my friend, let's talk a little bit about the obituaries when it comes to this one. For me, I'll keep it short and sweet. I enjoy this movie. I always have. I've always, you know me with movies like Trick or Treat and stuff like that. Shock 'em Dead. I love those kind of like punky and rock like infused type movies. But I enjoy this movie. I always do. I actually think it has a very strong rewatchability. I've always felt that way. While it's definitely got a lot of camp, it's definitely got a lot of goof, and it's just kind of that typical formula of those, late 70s, early 80s to mid 80s, style of slasher movie. I enjoy it. I think it's good. I think it's well written, and I think overall, I think it's actually very well executed. It's just an interesting design on how the director had people show emotions and react in certain ways. Again, this movie is it's a good actually amount of time before Killer Clowns. So Grant got more chops, and he got some more experience before doing Killer Clowns. But again, I do think it's a strong rewatchability. I think you can watch it a few times a year, a couple of times a year, and that would just be normal. It's definitely not something that I would shock to ever meet somebody who'd be like, oh man, I watch New Year's Evil like 10 times a year. Love that movie. Look, I love that movie too, but I don't love it 10 times a year. So while it's a high score in my heart, it's a 6.5 in reality.
oh yeah, I definitely gotta agree with you on that. It's one of those ones where it's fun. I mean, it was kind of the original as far as the New Year's horror films and stuff like that. I know they were, like I said, we said before, they were trying to piggyback off of like Halloween and that kind of stuff. But like I said, it's got a little bit of charm to it. Like I said, I love the grittiness of it. I do like the soundtrack. I think the soundtrack was fun. Those kind of movies was fun. And like I said, I mean, it's a lot of things in this movie that you can tell that other movies have copied or have
Yes.
seen stuff like we were talking about with the changing the voice box and the ghost face kind of thing. There's other little nuances throughout this movie that you can definitely see that other directors or other actors and stuff like that have kind of taken from that and go, okay, let's do this again. Plus, like I said, I love the fact that you saw the killer the whole entire time, where they
Yeah.
weren't hiding the killer who he was. It was no real mystery, even though it was a mystery to us because we had no idea who he was, because there wasn't any. Even when they talked about the dad, there was never really any like photos of the dad, or you didn't see anything that like resembled. So you didn't get the chance to. You had no idea who the dad looked like. It could have been any Joe Schmo on the street. So you would have never realized that this was who that killer was until that very end. So yeah, I gotta agree. I think it's the watchability is fun. I mean, like I said, I mean maybe once twice a year it's one of those ones, but it's like yeah, I mean it's not any, yeah, it's definitely not in a rotation of everything. But I think it's fun. I think it's a movie that probably, unless you're a huge horror fan and like beyond like a normal horror fan, you probably have never seen it, or maybe have only seen it once or something like that when it came on like a late night television or something like that. You might have seen it. But yeah, I mean I agree with you. I gotta give it a 6.5 as well. I think that's a good solid for New Year's Evil.
Right on, man. Absolutely. So Fangs, Infernos, Ghouls, that's the way it's going to be, man. It's going to be a 6.5 for New Year's Evil from 1980. And let's continue it on into the Devil's pick. Devil, my friend, let's talk Antisocial.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a weird movie. It's gonna be a completely different. I
Very.
mean, I like the fact that it is a completely different style of movie versus versus New Year's Evil. Where this one is definitely 80s. That New Year's Evil is definitely 80s camp. This is more of the now generation. Even though this movie is made in 2013, it's still that Gen Z slash, kind of this technological sort of advancement of horror films and stuff like that, where, yeah, it's just it's a fun movie. It's, some people call it like a tech horror, maybe a little bit of that into it as well. But yeah, I mean, it's got a lot of crazy stuff in it. I mean, to me, it's got this, this platform that's, it's, very Facebooky, very MySpacey, kind of feel to it. And it's just the whole, the whole concept of like being on social media and just being like, putting everything out on social media and everybody wanting likes and taking pictures of everything. And I mean, it leads into like one of the parts of the movie that I think is funny, like, because it's straight up right in the very beginning where, she's talking about like the main character is talking about like, she deleted her, her account. And she was like, well, how are you going to know when anything happens? Like, how do you talk to anybody, or how do you just talk to people? And you're like, well, I talk to them in person. Like,
Yeah.
I see them every day, because, they're in, the movie is like basically set in a college, a college kind of, background area. So it's like, yeah, it's like, well, yeah, I see blah, blah, blah every day. Like, why do I need to message them on their account or see what they ate today or what they're doing today? I can just go up to them and ask them, hey, how are you doing?
Right. And that's the overall like kind of like premise of this is basically like, when social media attacks to a certain degree, but like almost like legit as social media, not so much the cyberbullying where if you look at a movie like Unfriended was more about like cyberbullying, where this is more about legitimately when social media attacks. So basically the speed version, before we get into the full more of a breakdown, is that it's based around this little group of friends. They're having a New Year's Eve party, and the big campus social network is called the Social Red Room. And it, just like you said, it's how people communicate with each other. Hey, what are you up to? And it has the ability to do like, like basically what we call like FaceTimes now, and you can either send messages to each other or you can just talk, FaceTime style. And, the main character girl, she starts off, she's kind of FaceTiming with her boyfriend, who by the end of the conversation becomes her ex-boyfriend, and she just kind of gets over using Social Red Room. She's like, fuck this, I don't even want this, because my boyfriend, not only did we just have the conversation about taking a break, but within seconds of us hanging up the phone, she got a notification that he changed his status from taking a single. So like just right off the bat, it's like, nope, there's no this isn't a taking a break. This is a thing. And so she's just over that. And so she gets talked by her friends into coming to the New Year's Eve party. And while they're having the party is when they start basically being attacked by a bunch of just crazed, almost like bath salts type people, just attacking them. And then ultimately they find out that the reason everybody's acting so crazy is the actual social red room page itself has been laced with almost kind of like a virus, like hypnotic type virus, like subliminal hypnosis that turns basically everybody into the equivalent of a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's basically it. That's what I like about this movie. It's it's got that like social kind of horror to it, where it talks about how everybody is so adhered to their phones and these this social media whole entire world and stuff like that. And yeah, and it's this basically these evil people decided to make this thing where yeah you're on it, and it's kind of yeah, like you said, it's very virusy, sort of almost alien type like too, because it's this like black goo that kind of like can get into your ear or gets into you start start bleeding, you start having hallucinations and these symptoms that ultimately you become like a 28 days later zombie sort of like thing, where you're just going around just viciously attacking and stuff like that. And that's what that's like, I guess it's kind of funny when you eventually find out like what these people are all going around going crazy. And it's just like yeah, I mean, it's you got the scene where the one guy kind of breaks into the house and he's dead, and they don't know exactly what's going on, and he's trying to fend them off, and he kind of falls off the balcony and dies, and everyone's like, "Dude, you just killed that guy," and they're like, "I didn't do anything, man. He came at me. All I did was kind of just push him a little bit, and he fell." And they're doing all that, and then you have the one friend who is this like he's kind of like the Sherlock Holmes of the series, where he knows what's going on. He's watching different clips on YouTubes and things like this, where he's seeing like, okay, this is what's really happening and this is what's happening. So he's giving them the kind of insight, like this is if you see these kind of symptoms, they're sick. They got the sickness in them. They're going to eventually turn to what these crazy monsters. And then you get this cool video where it's like a doctor explaining like how this affects everybody and what's going on, these symptoms, and there's this possibility that there's a cure. And it just so happens to be that this cure, you basically got to give yourself a sort of a frontal lobotomy and put a drill in your head and pull this this alien kind of like technological wiring or whatever that's implanted in your head. And it just so happened to be that it just happened to be the guy, the school that she was going to, the guy that she's going around with is a med school guy. So what are the odds of that?
Yeah, but it's so weird though too, because yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, well, there's kind of a cure, but it's risky because yeah, you basically need a friend to tie you down, cut into your forehead, drill into your brain, and pull out this like, yeah, exactly, like this like wire centipede looking twig twist tie looking thing. Is fucking weird. But the thing that was also kind of interesting about it is while you could technically be infected by the zombie bite, as the saying goes, it's really not about that. It's about the fact that everybody's actually already infected. It was when you used it in moderation, it wasn't supposed to be a big thing. It was really them fucking with the software in order to be able to track the popularity of the network. And then the guy realized that basically, for lack of a better term, kind of upping the dosage of the whatever hypnosis drug type thing is what ultimately got into people's brains and caused the bleeding, the hallucinations, and caused like the zombification. So the fact that while they barricaded themselves in pretty much record time for a zombie movie and never overly, yeah, there were moments of breach, but overly were never really in too much jeopardy of getting attacked by the zombie horde. It didn't change the fact that the virus was already in the house because they were already infected just from using the network. And ultimately that's how a lot of them started falling one by one, becoming infected, getting killed by their mates and stuff like that, which led to the Sherlock Holmes guy figuring out the deal, showing them what could be done, teaching them about this necessary risk, and whether or not they kind of chose to go through with it. And the two final characters, they're kind of realizing that they need each other, but the guy is like, well, I already feel super infected, so I'm not going to survive. And she's basically like, look, you've always been there for me, like you can't leave me. But he does, die, frankly, at the hands of one of their other friends who gets back into the house. But she ends up taking him out, good old laptop to the kisser, and performs the brain surgery on herself. And that's what kind of leads to the very end / cliffhanger of the movie, which is she, survives. She's walking just down the neighborhood as you basically start seeing people twitching and getting back up. And that's when you realize, and there's kind of like a news article, like TV thing kind of going in the background, letting people know that, like, well, they don't die that easily. You can take them out, you can knock them out, but they're going to regenerate for a second wave. And you see them, start getting up and ultimate running at her to attack, which, leads you to wonder if there is a sequel, or would they do a sequel? But we'll get to that momentarily.
Yeah. Like I said, I like that. Once she decides that she's got to give herself that lobotomy, and she takes that drill and she just takes the drill right to the dome, and eventually pulls that thing out, and then as soon as she's kind of break free, what just happens to be, these zombie type creatures start coming towards her. Just happened to be an axe right there, man, and that's when she gets this axe, and then she just becomes a badass in this movie.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Which is basically like the poster you see in the poster. She's holding this axe, and she's just chopping heads and chopping bodies.
Rambo headband and all.
Yeah, she goes Rambo style and stuff like that, and just goes, come on. And even like you said, in that scene where, at the very end where she's kind of walking around and you get that report unless you've like completely dismembered them, that these creatures are going to come back alive. They're going to twitch and they're going to come back, and she just kind of, they start coming towards her, and she's just like, bring it on, man. She's ready to, take on the entire world. While we didn't mention that in previous things, before she gets, before all this crazy stuff happens, she's also pregnant, because she was been puking, and people think that she was sick of this virus to begin with, and she's like, no, I'm not sick, I'm pregnant. So not only is she killing millions and millions of hordes of zombies, she's protecting the unborn fetus while she's messing around with these people. And like you said, it kind of just ends with that kind of cliffhanger. And even though I haven't seen the sequel, there is a sequel that came out a couple years later, which I guess continues on with her story. And
it does star the same actress. She does reprise her character.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. Like I said, that's like, now, like I said, I thought I'd seen this movie before because I remember the poster, and I was like, oh, I think but then when we were watching this and found out, the New Year's horror aspect of it, I was like, oh, cool. Watched it, and I was like, I don't think I've ever seen this movie before. So I'm kind of looking forward to maybe diving into that second one and seeing how it goes, as to, just to see, how it compares to the first one. But like I said, I thought this movie was just, I thought it was super cool. I thought it was just like a cool concept of this, new wave of, social media, farcity, because that's basically, this whole movie is basically, you can kind of even consider it satire horror very much.
Yeah. No, you definitely can. And so I'm kind of the same way. I'm gonna let you kick off the obituaries, being that it's your pick. But when I got done watching the movie, I was like, I'm curious to watch the second one. It's tickled my fancy enough. And I do think it's something that I'm gonna check out more for the sake of like curiosity, which I'll explain. But obituary time, my dear devil. What do you think of Antisocial?
Yeah, I thought, like I said, overall, I thought it was a fun movie. Like you weren't really kind of. It's one of those movies where you didn't know exactly how it was gonna go. You know what I mean? You figured it was gonna be your normal New Year's Eve party. They killed somebody's sister 20 years ago, and they're coming back to haunt them, or their brothers that didn't, the twin brother that nobody knew about is coming back for revenge or something like that. So you don't really know. And then all of a sudden, you get the social media aspect of it, and you're like, okay, maybe it's gonna be turning into this kind of movie. It's gonna be these people just going crazy because somebody didn't like their likes, or didn't give them a like or whatever, so they're gonna chop their head off because they don't like, you didn't give me these likes and you didn't like my social media post. And then you add in with this little aspect of the virus and this little worm thingy going in your head, and then it becomes sort of a zombie movie, a zombie apocalypse movie. So it's got pretty much this weird, like, a bunch of different genres and horror all kind of mixed into one, which I thought was kind of cool. It was, it's not the first movie to use social media and that kind of stuff as far as horror, but I think it's original as far as its storyline. No one's ever really done it before, where it was like, the 28 days later kind of aspect we're talking about with the blood dropping. Well, this is more of like, if you're on the social media page all the time, eventually it's going to turn you into this mindless zombie, which we've always joked around about. It's always been like, if you don't get off your phone, you're going to just turn into zombies, or the government controls your brain waves and all this stuff. If you're on your phone too much, it's going to turn you into a zombie, which, I guess in this movie they were right. They did ultimately turn them into a zombie. So that was cool. Like I said, it's a rewatchable movie. I think it's fun. Like I said, the fact that it did get a sequel, so that's kind of cool, where it's going to continue on. And when you compare it towards, New Year's Evil, I guess a little bit, like I said, that being an 80s movie, this being a newer movie, I just like the fact that, I think this movie ultimately is probably going to get a little bit more love here and there, just because it's a newer film and a lot of younger kids now are going to see it, where a lot of younger generations going to be like, New Year's Evil, that came out in 1980s. Yeah, that's for old folks or something like that. Well, they'll watch this instead, because at least it's within the last, like 10, 15 years as far as that. But overall, like I said, I don't know. I'm kind of in the ballpark, so I'm kind of see where you were going to go. But I'm almost kind of in the same realm of New Year's Evil. I think they were really good. I'm right down with that 6.5, but basically kind of what I gave to New Year's Evil. I think both of the movies were both fun and both entertaining in both aspects. They each had their pluses and their minuses.
Yeah, no, to be honest, I'm kind of with you in that. So here's my thing with Antisocial. It was the end of the movie that started to kind of get me a little bit more, interested, and ultimately gave me enough interest to want to check out the sequel eventually. I don't need to run to it right this second, but for the record, Mrs. Vamp enjoyed Antisocial as well. She just thought it was cool. She's like, that was kind of interesting because we watched it together. And I was like, yeah. I didn't, my only thing is like, and it's weird. So I feel I have to also kind of explain this, because like I have to kind of precurse it with, yes, when it comes to 80s slash, we know the formula. We understand the formula. Formulas work to a certain degree. I paid attention throughout all of Antisocial. It kept me entertained, and I did enjoy the movie. But for a good solid 2/3 of the movie, kind of up until the twist was given, I wasn't feeling overly impressed. I really wasn't. I enjoyed it. The acting was good. The effects were solid. There was nothing like stupid or eye rolly or cringy, but it was coming off to me just as another zombie movie, just another zombie apocalypse movie. And I was like, I don't get it. I don't understand why this is a thing. Like, okay, there's a school that has a school-wide network that's really popular. Well, a lot of schools have that. That's kind of a thing nowadays. Okay, fine, good on them. She had a painful breakup. She got off the network because she believed in talking to humans as humans and not just being keyboard warriors. Hey, good on her. I love that because I feel that there's not enough of that in the world. But I did appreciate the I liked the twist. It was interesting. I was like, okay, now that's an interesting way to infect people. I don't I don't know if I necessarily buy it, to be honest. Um, because like it's one thing if they had went the direction of fully hypnosis into it, where you can still have people attacking, you can still have them, have internal injuries of some way. I didn't I wasn't fully convinced on the whole like wait, like a Facebook hypnosis is going to implant like you said like an alien seed in your brain. Come on, man, you got to do better than that. But ultimately, it is a fun movie. Again, I think it has a rewatchability factor. I don't personally think the rewatchability of Antisocial is quite as strong as New Year's Evil, to be honest. Again, we're old heads, We've been around a few hundred years and seen a lot of movies, so I I know where I'm coming from when it comes to that, and I'm aware of the comparison, where the new school generation could see things incredibly different. But it's a unique concept. It doesn't super have an equal. It's got similarities, like I mentioned, to a movie like Unfriended, but there's not as much supernatural or chemical imbalance when it comes to that. But I do agree with you on the 6.5, just because I liked it. I didn't love it, but I didn't love it in a negative way. It didn't feel as storytell grippy as I felt it should have. Solid twist, but a little not, but I still wasn't fully buying it. And again, a good chunk of the movie to me really did feel like it was something I'd already seen. And so it took me a second to get into it. And I was very pleased that I stuck out the whole movie. And it wasn't really in jeopardy. I wasn't sitting there at any point going like, I'm going to fudge it through Devil and Me's review. No, I was still fully invested. I feel like they could have dropped better hints or done things a little bit different and earlier to keep it a little bit more fresh than me feeling like I was watching something a little bit more Diary of the Deadish, Land of the Deadish, and especially 30 days. Not 30 days a night. 28 days later. About it. So honestly, I'm with you, man. I think a 6.5 is solid for this movie. And I definitely invite the Fangs, Infernos, and Ghouls to check it out, especially with social media being so prominent. And not only what you and I are doing right now for them, but also just what they're doing in their everyday lives. So there is a sense of reality to the movie that I do think the Fangs and Infernos should judge for themselves. But I do agree with you on a 6.5, which does leave us at a crossroads. I do kind of want to give the win to New Year's Evil for being kind of an OG with the subtle hints and what, again, we cannot guarantee that this is a thing, but it's got more to the movie that I think led to the improvements in the genre in the long run that aren't things that Antisocial is going to give you. But again, it is a unique concept. I think they did well, and I think it was good execution. But I think Antisocial was more about something we've seen before with a unique twist versus I feel like New Year's Evil, as campy and very 80s as it is, I feel like it gave us more in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I mean, granted, the movie, New Year's Evil did come out earlier, so that it has the advantage of being more original versus, a movie that came out in 2013 where,
Absolutely.
you can't be you can be original, but you can't always be 100% original. A lot of times nowadays, especially when you're dealing with like like the themes of the 2013 Antisocial, where the social media and the zombies and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm a stickler for old horror camp movies. So I mean, yeah, I agree with giving probably the little slight in for the for the win towards New Year's Evil versus Antisocial. But yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on. I mean, we can give the stamp to New Year's Evil, but I
Yeah.
think it really depends on the generational gap of horror fans. Horror fans that grew up in the 70s, 80s, maybe the early 90s will probably lean more towards New Year's Evil, where your 2000s, your Screams, those kind of horror films, the genre, those fans, like people who are in their 20s now, they're going to these horror cons, or younger, or maybe in their early 30s and stuff like that, are going to more levitate towards Antisocial because of them being always around the social media. That
Yeah.
social media aspect has always been around, where in a 19-year-old, 20-year-old won't understand the themes of New Year's Evil, because one, they don't know what that contraption of a boombox that he was using even is. They don't know what a telephone booth is to begin with, so they'll be like, why is this guy going into this thing and using this weird contraction to talk to people? Why don't you just call him on a cell phone? Or so so it's like, it's got that media aspect
Yeah.
of both of those being such dire different ones. But yeah, as far as us old heads, yeah, I mean, granted, sometimes there are movies that are newer that I will give over old, OG movies, old movies. But
Totally.
on this one, definitely, I'll give the little extra bump to New Year's Evil, just because, like you said, I mean, it's more fun. It's definitely like you can. Antisocial, I mean, even though it's newer, may affect the horror genre a little bit, where it can add people, like, people who are directing movies now. But you can definitely tell that, New Year's Evil influenced people throughout, the late regular 80s and 90s, and director horror films now, where it's got a little bit more indirect love to the horror genre.
Absolutely. So fangs, infernos, ghouls alike, that is the way it is going to be. By way of our closest showdown yet, victory to the vampire by a fang, by a tooth. A very, very close comparison, a very, very close, battle when it comes to this one. But I will throw this out to you, fangs, infernos, and ghouls. Devil and I love hearing from you. Let us know in the comments. Let us know on the YouTube channel. Did we get this one right? We would love to hear what you guys think. Not only the fellow old heads that we know enjoy this show, but also you new generation that give us a lot of love every week as well. So we would love to hear from you guys. So make sure that you pop into the comments whether or not you think me and Devil got this one right. But as far as it goes, we are going to give victory to the vampire as New Year's Evil squeaks out a showdown victory over Antisocial. And as always, we want to make sure that we give a lot of love and support and appreciation to the partners and sponsors of our show, and everything that they do for us, and everything that we, of course, try to give back to them. But we will be back ever so shortly there, my friends. We will see you soon. Horns up. Bangs out.
Devil, my friend, I think we should have a little quick conversation about everybody's respectful celestial abodes, where it be my little coffin, where I lay my head at night, or at times that you feel that you just want to go back down to make sure that hell's not getting out of whack while you are away. Let's talk about it. Vampire and Devil's newest partnership in Twisted Vines, our dear friends, Chris and Sarah and Cadaver.
Oh yeah, you like scary stuff, you like horror decor, come and check out Twisted Vines. They make all the kind of cool shit, all for your house, all kinds of scary shit. They love it. You like to bring back the horror, you want to scare your neighbors, you want to conjure up a friend to talk to, you want to conjure up somebody bad, you want to do some bad stuff to them, you go to Twisted Vines and get some of their merch.
Absolutely, for sure. Everything is completely handmade by them. So if you need a little friend, maybe a round set abode, maybe you want to conduct a little evil towards a friend that was a friend, maybe no longer a friend. They have voodoo dolls they can do for you to allow for such activities. But you know how much we love our Ouija boards, my friend, and they make all of those by hand. They took care of your beloved vampire with a nice Nosferatu board, but the devil, he happens to be a Munsters fan. And not only do they do boards as traditional rectangles, but they can put a little bit of coffin flair in them.
Oh yeah, look at that coffin shape Munster board. Yeah, you wanna conjure up Mr. Herman? You wanna ask him how Pet Cemetery was? You can do it on this board. Oh yeah.
Absolutely, my friend. So again, thank you so much to Twisted Vines for partnering with the Vampire and Devil podcast, and make sure that you Fangs and Infernos are checking them out on their Facebook page, on their Instagram pages, and making sure that you are checking them out as they move around the country, showing their craft off at all of the various horror cons and oddities expos that they love to do. So absolutely, my friend, of course, man, horns up, fangs out for our friends at Twisted Vines.
Oh yeah.
Devil, my friend. Fashion, things to wear, possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies. Merch, we have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rockin' Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies, we got some shirts, we got some tanks coming up, we got some booty shorts, we got all the stuff you want to wear from the Vampire and Devil podcast, thanks to Rockin' Horror.
Horns up, fangs out. All right, Fangs, we got a brand new Coffin Nails to discuss. It's been brought to my attention. We have a fresh 2024 movie that I just got done watching. It was brought to yours truly by our beloved friend, the Devil. Let's talk a little bit about Silent Bite. You know, this movie was actually a lot of fun to watch. It's not overly dramatic. It's not overly, awesome. But, I mean, for the Christmas season, it's definitely enjoyable. And it's a lot of fun. It's basically about a bunch of bank robbers who shack up in a motel for a heist to protect themselves from a heist that they just did. And the thing that they don't realize is they were actually lured there by a clan of female vampires just to be their victims to feed on. But it's cool, it's fun, it's campy, all of the guys in the heist have Christmas-related names because they're all dressed like Santas and elves and all that kind of stuff. So it's exactly what you expect from a Christmas-type movie. But it's got some fun vampire lore that they do. Unique kills, unique ways to rid themselves of vampires as they're also being picked off one by one as kind of an eye for an eye style. But overall, it's a fun movie. It's not going to win any awards, but it's an enjoyable time. It's got some decent acting. It's got actually some pretty cool effects, when there are kills that involve UV light or the sunlight. They actually did a pretty cool job portraying it to where it doesn't look overly campy or weak. So it's got some pretty good digital effects to go along with some proper special effects types. So it's overall pretty cool. And basically the climax of the movie comes around the point that, one of the female vampires who's kind of fallen for one of the heists guys, kind of turns her back on her quote-unquote mother in order to save him by sacrificing not only herself, but, killing her mother as well by giving him the means to, get it done by kind of faking, always telling her mom that she could have been an actress and suckering her in for her ultimate demise. So overall, look, it's a lot of fun. Like I said, won't win any awards, but it's definitely a movie I can see myself popping in periodically around the Christmas season to just kind of sit back and enjoy. So Silent Bite from 2024 is going to get a 5 on this edition of Vampires Coffin Nails. Ghouls and Fangs. Vampire and the Devil here. I got a little question for you. Devil, there's kind of a triangle, a three-headed monster per se, when it comes to Baltimore, that I don't think people necessarily realize. We've got Edgar Allan Poe. We've got John Waters. But what else do we have?
We got the Ouija boards, oh yeah.
Absolutely. Starting in Baltimore way back in the day, a lot of people are unfamiliar with William Fuld and Elijah Bond, who patented, and the birth of the Ouija board was right here in Baltimore. Devil and Vampire coming at you from the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore, courtesy of our friend John Kozik, who invited us out to check it out and shoot a little conversation action to let you guys all know. Of course, you've seen on our socials that we have partnered with both museums, and we couldn't be more appreciative to John for that opportunity. So whenever you're here in Baltimore, of course, right attached to the Bazaar Oddity Shop off of the Avenue, you have Witchboard Museum Baltimore. And when you're in Witch City, USA, up in Salem, Massachusetts, that's when you get to visit the Salem Witchboard Museum.
Oh yeah, if you want to see some cool stuff, see some cool boards, get some cool history, go see our boy John. Man, that guy is really awesome, man. That dude knows his boards, he knows his history, he's about preserving the society of witch boards and the talking boards and all that goodness. And, you know, we love it. We love the fact that, you know, they were going to bring in this museum here in Baltimore. So all the Baltimore fans or all your East Coast fans that are maybe not as far away, going up to Salem, come out to Baltimore and check it out. You know what I mean? Because there's some cool stuff in this museum, and you got to check it out because the devil and the vampire said so.
That is facts right there, my friend. Again, absolutely attached to the Bazaar Oddities shop in the Avenue in Hamden for the Baltimore established Witchboard Museum. We're off of Essex Street in Salem, Massachusetts for the Salem Witchboard Museum. Horns up, fangs out.